Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Business After Hours podcast. Joined with Jared and Paul. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Hey, it's Friday, right?
All day.
Any big weekend plans for you two?
Yeah, we're headed towards kind of the East Texas area for a football camp.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be doing that on Saturday.
My wife runs my social calendar, and I'm on a need-to-know basis. I'm not exactly sure. I may have big plans for all I know. And I'm sure she told me about them, but I may not have been paying attention.
It's that compromise that we were talking about.
Compromise. Know your role. It's very important.
Exactly. Absolutely.
All right. So, Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like early days to today. Kind of just give us a brief background about yourself.
Sure. I have a long work history. I don't know how old I look, but I was working full-time in my father's restaurant back in 1983. That's when I started working full-time. I was young, but like I said, I'm in Louisiana. We don't have the same kind of laws they have in other states. And when you work for your parents,
there's no laws anyways.
Yeah. But I worked there through college. And so my first job was through that lens of ownership. And I don't know another way to explain it, but my dad used to, internally get really angry when he'd see his employees walking over a piece of trash in front of the front door when they're trying to open the store. It's like, I know they saw it. Why didn't they pick it up? And he would fuss at people for not picking it up, and they still wouldn't pick it up. And there would always be that one guy that saw it and picked it up. And that became my dad's hero, the dishwasher that picks up trash, even though it's not his job. So I was proud of the family business. I felt like I was always in the marketing space, but I had a bunch of different types of jobs after college. But I always had that lens of ownership, because you don't necessarily have to be the owner to have it. But it's when you see a problem, your first response is, that isn't my job. Your first response is, am I the person to fix it? And should I? That served me well. I worked in sales for over 20 years. I was actually pretty good at it. I did sales management, and sales training, which sounds similar, but it's three different skill sets. It's completely different.
Sure.
Transitioning, it's like player to coach. It's different.
Sure.
I don't know. I was somehow perversely compelled to go to law school in my 30s. I don't know why. I think I'm really competitive. My sister was going. She told me I couldn't get in. I said, "Oh, I could have got in. I just chose not to go to law school after undergraduate." And she said, "I'm sure that's what everybody who doesn't get in says."
Yeah.
Well, we're celebrating her, graduation party. We're drinking champagne. It's escalating. We didn't have money growing up. But we got to go to the fancy high school because we were good at sports. And so we had, I don't say it was a scholarship, because I think that's illegal. I think it was work study programs where we cleaned windows for 30 minutes, and we got to go to the, Catholic high school, 5A powerhouse, state champion and everything kind of school for free. And we always were very, very competitive. So I ended up in law school basically on a bet. Didn't ever want to practice law. Graduated, but went back into sales. Stayed in sales for a while. Started a couple of businesses. Both of them were successful. Sold out. And then in 2016, with my tail between my legs, I went go work for my good friend from law school. Her firm was growing, but she wasn't making any money. And she needed help kind of managing her staff. And I went there, immediately diagnosed what was wrong, figured out, and it's basic things. Law school, everybody in law school I thought was smarter than me academically. But I was hiring entry-level sales reps. I had a head count. I mean, when you get to the end of the month, when you have head count pressures, your threshold is, do they have a pulse? You're not even picky at the end of all these people I felt were smarter than me in night school, but I wouldn't hire any of them as an entry-level sales rep. I think it's just completely different mindsets and skill sets to be. If you're a good lawyer, you're probably not a good salesman. And the reverse is true. If you're a good salesman, you're probably not a good lawyer. That's a rare combination. And I saw where my sales acumen was valuable in a law firm. I thought I'll spend 10 years, maybe I'll go take the bar. And they're like, we can find lawyers. Don't do that. Don't waste your time. You wouldn't even probably be a good lawyer. But you've normalized revenue with, I would show them a spreadsheet, which in my sales days would have embarrassed most of the people I worked with. It's like 6 columns, What's the activity? How many of these kind of calls do you make? What's your funnel? What's your pipeline? I'm watching these Ivy League educated attorneys with years of experience. Their minds are blowing. Their minds are blown because they've seen a spreadsheet that tracks activity.
Right.
I mean, if you ever sold a rainbow vacuum cleaner, you had a spreadsheet and you knew what activity was and those kinds of things. So I grew this law firm substantially in about 5.5 years. They were doing about $800,000 with no profit in 2015. I came in January 2016. We broke $1 million in 2016, which was a big number. It was like a milestone. They had never crossed that number.
Sure.
But they made a profit of over $100,000. That was an improvement. It was a husband and wife. That's what I'm saying they, but they were both lawyers and they owned this firm. The next year we eclipsed 2 million.
Wow.
2019 was just under 4 million and just under 1 million of total owner benefit for the two of them. And we were rolling. We had a lot of momentum. We were growing. We were opening new offices, hiring new lawyers. We had marketing that was working. Everything was firing on all cylinders heading into 2020. Unfortunately, in 2020, we lost about 5 months of revenue because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was a gut punch. We crossed 4 million. So technically we grew from the prior year, but we would have blown through. Probably would have blown through 5 million in Q3.
Sure.
We were just positioned to really kill it. And then they had made some transformations within the company. They were going to remotely run the firm offshore because they had all this money. They built a house in Turks and Caicos. It was just they were going to remotely run it, and they didn't need a COO anymore. And quite frankly, if I was doing my job, I would have advised them to dump me because I was not working full time. If I was a good COO, I would have said, hey, you need to get rid of that Paul guy. He's dead weight. He's not producing any revenue. I wrote a book and got it published at work on the clock. I taught myself to fly a drone in the parking lot during the day. Like, I had nothing to do. It was all systems and processes and accountability. And I got rid of the bad employees and I replaced them with, I replaced the C players with B players, and I got A players, and the B players got to be B+ players. And everybody had ownership. We had established a culture, and there was accountability all over the place. And we got out of bad contracts. It was a profitable business. They wanted to run remotely. They didn't really need me anymore. They paid me a generous severance, a year's pay. Like, they just kept me on the payroll for a year with benefits. So that was very nice. In fact, they said, you wrote a book. Why don't you take this time and write a second book? And I thought about it, but I'm still, for lack of a better word, I'm still kind of a job whore. I wanted a job. I wanted another income. So I put my resume on Indeed or some job board. That day, there was a company based in Miami that did law firm management. And they would provide fractional CEOs and fractional COOs and that kind of service. And their recruiter reached out to me the same day that I uploaded my resume because they had 3 requirements. They wanted someone with a Juris Doctorate who had created businesses that were profitable and sold them, and also had 5 years experience as a C-suite executive in a law firm. I thought it was a prank. I was like, who has this ridiculous resume? I mean, my God, I'm embarrassed of my resume. To me, it says I can't decide what I want to do. I just thought it was a negative for me. But for this particular role, it was exactly what they were looking for. And I learned a lot in that role. I wasn't a business major. I didn't have a MBA. And the training was basically a law firm MBA in 7 weeks. Drinking from a fire hose. My mind was blown day after day. I was like, man, I could have been way better for my friend's firm had I known this. Wow, this is helpful. This is a tool. Just every day I'm having an epiphany. And I'm surrounded by these really high performers. So I'm trying to step my game up. I'm not the big fish in the firm anymore. Everybody, people worked at the Pentagon. They had people that were presidents of major universities, went to school at Ivy League colleges. And here I am with my BS Louisiana resume. I'm thinking, I better step my game up with these people. And I really had good results. And I think I had better results than some of the people with more talent and education because I felt like I was on a bubble. So I think I probably took it more seriously, worked a little harder. I would work as a fractional CEO for 30 separate law firms at one time. I thought it was a part-time job. I didn't know if it was 1/30th of a job. That was extreme to me, but it was just about balancing time and keeping up with it. Maybe you've noticed, but I kind of have a little attention deficit thing going on, and I have a lot of energy. But my biggest fear is usually getting bored. It is physically impossible to get bored if you're the CEO of 30 separate law firms in all different kinds of practice areas. It wasn't like all family lawyers or all criminal lawyers. Some of them were contingency-based, personal injury, medical malpractice, immigration, all these different firms. And they all have their own little sets of drama, right?
Right.
And so I never got bored. I thrived. I grew every one of those firms, an average of 60% year over year, which is good. We would promise 30, and the national average is 5. So 60 is amazing. That's really good. You're a 7-figure business. It's hard to double without really spending a lot of money for capacity and marketing and things like that. So I had really good stats. I had all my KPIs were hit. I was happy. Then the company decided to make some drastic pricing changes, which led to a lot of exits from members, which meant a lot of severances were being offered. So I figured, okay, I'm at the end of the road with this gig. This was 3 years of fun. Got a lot of professional development. And after that, I decided to go into business for myself, doing the same thing, but didn't see a reason to limit myself to law firms, although that's kind of an obvious niche just because of the JD and because of, I understand trust accounting and what risks are to a license to practice law. And those types of things are unique to law firms, but I don't care what your business is. You need marketing, you need sales, you need all the same things in every type of business.
Right.
I like to, I'm doing what I did, but I would take a step back, find out the goals of the owner, turn it into a business plan that was in my format, and then hold them accountable to the business plan. But the plan's based on their goals. It's not based on some number they've never achieved, because I found that's not motivating. And to grow, you've got to be motivated to grow.
Agree. And I think all this started because your sister kind of challenged you about law school.
A lot of things in my life have their roots in challenges, and I'm sure a lot of things in my sister's life are rooted in challenge. We're still very competitive. I was back in high school. I love to say this because I'm proud of it. It's not true anymore, but in high school, I got clocked at 4.4 seconds in a 40-yard dash, and that is fast. I don't know if you ever ran track, but I was fast. I flew. I don't know if that was accurate.
Run from the police, so I don't know anything about track.
I was fast. It helped me out. I stole a lot of bases in baseball. I could run down outfield. I did a little bit of track. Didn't like track. Felt it was running for nothing, but I was faster than everybody. So if you're the best, it's always fun. But I'm 53 now, and I'm pretty certain that I can't run a 4.4 second 40-yard dash anymore. Why would I? There's no motivation. There's no track meet. I'm not playing baseball anymore. And what's more sad and pathetic than watching men in their 50s race in a sprint? I mean, somebody's going to fall and break a hip. It's not even safe. But if we're in the woods and a bear is running directly at me, guess what? I'm going to find a gear and I might break my record.
Don't tell the women that, because they'd rather be in a woods with a bear.
They say that.
Clearly never been in the woods.
But that's what I call proper motivation. You know, you've got to find some motivation. You can't just get it from the surface. It's got to come from within.
So let's talk about your book.
Money is just a stack of money.
Let's
But
talk about
motivation is all the cool stuff you can buy.
Let's talk about your book. Stop, Back Up, and Grow.
Okay.
Talk about it. Let's hear about your book.
Well, that was an absolute product of the shutdowns, the initial shutdown. I mean, even in Louisiana, we shut down for a couple of weeks, I think. But I mean, we shut down, you know, so I know everybody.
Well, we did in Texas too. So
yeah. But I had this, I was in sales for so long. And if you've ever worked in sales, it's a constant rejection, right? I mean, it's just a lot of rejection. And a lot of times you got to get yourself motivated again, because, you know, if you strike out 10 times in a row, it's hard to do number 11. It's constantly frustrating. And there are thousands of books written about sales and personal growth and motivation that people that work in sales for an extended amount of time have all read them. You know, Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, all these sales kind of books, they're very popular. I found them useful for the motivation purpose, but I've read so many of them that I basically had one bouncing around in my head. And I decided I was going to write it. It started out, I was going to write a blog. And then I said, well, I don't want to write a blog and then have it one blog, because how many times you've seen that where somebody wrote a blog 4 years ago and they never even wrote a second one. So what I did was I wrote it as 3 separate blogs about personal growth. And then I was going to timely post them in order. Well, they started kind of writing themselves. And then after I had the 3 blogs written, I thought I could write 5 or 6 chapters about each one of these. These are kind of like a cliff notes of something bigger. And so it wasn't a matter of me planning to do it. I just outlined that 3-part blog and turned it into a 16-chapter book. And I thought at first it was going to be kind of cheesy, you know, and fluffy, but I was really liking it. I was enjoying writing it. It was a great exercise. I got into arguments with my Microsoft Word grammar and stuff. Like, no, this is right. I had to change some of my settings because I didn't agree with the way that Microsoft Word was editing my stuff. Found a publisher, got it edited. It's called Stop, Back Up, Grow. I meant to write it. It's a motivational book, but it's about growth, and it's about the concept of sometimes you've got to stop and separate yourself from whatever you're stuck in right now. Get yourself out of the weeds and kind of go up on the balcony and check on your foundation. You know, do you even remember why you do what you're doing? How effective and efficient are you, you know, at what you're supposed to do? You know, are your priorities in check? All of those types of things. And I designed it with the thought of my years as a sales trainer and sales manager. I would hire these people to come in. They wrote a book, and the book had an accompanying workbook, and all the sales reps or all the support staff would spend 2 days in like a seminar, and they would go through the workbook, and they would break into small groups. And we paid these people a lot of money for this. Right. And I remember thinking I could do this. So when I wrote the book, I kind of thought the next step was to turn it into like a course.
Okay.
But not long after the book came out was when I got my new job. And the reason I kind of rose to the top in the interview process was the owner of the company read my book and loved it. It was during COVID when it came out. So even though in June of 2021, everything was back to normal pretty much in South Louisiana, the corporate, you could tell when someone had a corporate business. You know, the Chili's made everybody sit in their car with their masks on, waiting to get paged to tell them they could come in. You know, the local restaurant right next door was over capacity and nobody had a mask on.
Right.
You know, it was just,
Yeah.
you could tell Chili's was run from somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
The local restaurant was locally, but all the bookstores are not headquartered in Lafayette, Louisiana. They're somewhere else that was taking COVID way more seriously, which meant they had no events like book signings, which you normally are good shots in the arm for a newly launched book. So I started doing book signings at restaurants. Like I'd get a back dining room or something, and I sold hundreds and hundreds of books, but I bought them directly from the drop shipper. I didn't buy them through Amazon, which that's the hack to become a bestseller. You lower the price to 99 cents and then you buy 100 copies and then you're in the top 100 in your category that day, which means you can call yourself a best-selling author.
Bestseller. Yeah.
For self-help personal growth books, that number was under 40 in a week. And I sold 500 across 2 weeks.
Wow.
But I can't call myself a best-selling author. And I don't care. But when people say it, I'm just not all that impressed because it's a commodity that you can purchase now, basically.
Yeah.
And the whole writing a book for marketing purposes to call yourself an expert in a field, I think the boom of that marketing has actually been replaced by podcasts.
I agree.
Podcasts,
yeah.
especially if you're doing consulting or coaching type work or
You see all those same guys that used to write books for their marketing is now all doing podcasts. So I think you're right.
I'm doing a podcast. I started one 2 weeks ago, and it's about business growth. And I'm interviewing my avatar of people who want to be on my podcast. They're exactly who I would work with. And nothing I've done marketing wise has filled my calendar with this many meetings with my ideal client. Now it's not a sales call and they don't always turn into sales calls, but when we're prepping for the podcast, they want to know what I do. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking to them. Their wall's not up because if you own a business, you know that it is physically impossible for you to do your job if you pay attention to the constant marketing that's targeted at you. So eventually, to get things done, you just block them all.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get past that wall? I'm past it. I'm on a podcast. I'm doing them a favor. They're excited. They're happy. This is marketing to them. In fact, that was my strategy at first. I want to be a guest on as many podcasts as I possibly can to promote what I do and provide value. Then I realized, well, I didn't stop doing that. Obviously, I'm guest on your podcast, but I'm hosting one of my own, and it's filling up my calendar with way more appointments than anything I did, organically, marketing wise, or paid wise has produced. It's almost like referrals. Referrals are great because if you give me 10 referrals, I probably got at least 5 clients. Mm-hmm. But to get 5 clients, I think I need 15,000 Google pay-per-click.
Right, absolutely.
Much higher percentage of people that want to work with you. Podcast connections are like referrals.
I agree.
Way better way to use your time. And I'm sure you guys enjoy it. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm meeting all kind of interesting people that I would have never met otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the fun of doing the podcast, I think. How does one go and promote a book?
Well, I would say a lot of things you can do yourself in the self-publishing world. And there's a few things I spent money on that I could have done myself that I didn't really see value in, but it's live and learn. I mean, if I would have done a second book, I would have done some things different, but I did spend about $3,000 for a local publicist. It was a couple of ladies that did publicist work for local authors. That was money well spent. Okay. That was not only were they very experienced in filling a book signing and marketing it through their channels and press releases. They got me on a lot of podcasts, and podcasts in 2021 weren't what they are now. They weren't everywhere. So getting on podcasts was like getting on, CBS This Morning or something. It was like complicated. And I did a bunch of like local TV morning shows who were just hungry for content. Like, the morning show in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yeah, I'm talking about my book, but it was just this blanket press release. My press release showed up in Forbes. It showed up on the Cowboy channel, which is apparently a TV channel. It showed up on Financial Times. It was the same press release, but people take things off the wire and they just plug them into spaces. So I'm sharing, look, my book was featured on Forbes. Oh, that looks impressive. It's the same thing that was featured in the cowboychannel.com.
Right.
It didn't matter. But they had that network. The best money spent in promoting a book is with a publicist. Unless you have experience being a publicist, it's not the time it would take to get the experience and to get the network and to get the Rolodex of contacts would cost you way more whatever a publicist is going to charge you.
Sure.
It's kind of those things. Like there's projects around the house I'll do myself, but the ones that show like trim carpentry or drywall, I'm hiring somebody that's done that 1,000 times. I'm not going to watch a YouTube video and do it myself. But some of the things behind the scenes, like I have a barn, any repairs in the barn, I do myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my wife decorates the house. I decorate my room. That's it. I can have my stuff here. But when it comes to the house, everything has to look nice. A publicist is one of those things. Unless that's your jam or your job, or you're already an influencer that has millions of followers, that's something to spend money on.
Okay. Did you find it difficult to come up with material to put in the book, or was that easy as well?
Well, no, it was easy because all the conversations were interviews about the book. In some cases, they wanted me to read an excerpt. It was really focused on the book. Of the things I'm an expert on, I'm an expert of the book I wrote. In fact, I've ripped it off. Like I've literally plagiarized my own book.
Well, tell us about now let's move on to your business, La Familia Business Planning.
Okay.
Let me put that up here so that folks can get the website here. Tell us about the business, because I see under services, you got business planning, accountability, coaching, COO, CFO, recruiting, HR management, marketing, dashboard creation, website design.
Well, I'm one of those guys that knows enough about SEO to be dangerous.
Okay.
So I know that putting a lot of things on a website increases traffic, but what I am and what I've learned leaving a corporate setting and going into business for myself, when I worked for the bigger company, it was a terminatable offense if you recommended a vendor to because we were acting as a fractional C-suite. If we make a recommendation and I recommend like a marketing company and the marketing company is terrible, it reflected on us. Sure. They hold it against us because we recommended them. So there was no recommending of vendors, which was frustrating because sometimes I knew the exact vendor that was the perfect match I knew the vendor that could help, but my hands were tied and I wasn't interested in getting terminated for making a referral. I would say, do your due diligence, look up people. I was allowed to say, no, don't hire that vendor because I may have known of a bad experience that other people had with them, but I couldn't make recommendations. But I started to really have a strong network of vendors who I knew and trusted and worked with. Once I was working for myself, I got exposed to the whole world of affiliate marketing, where if I refer someone to one of my contacts, the business will pay me like almost like a finder's fee or like a residual commission. And I wasn't driven by the commissions or the size of the commissions. I was driven by the vendors that I liked, but I'm not a recruiter. If you have a law firm and you need a lawyer or a paralegal, I'm not your solution but I'm recruiting on there because I know someone who is really good. really freaking good. She makes miracles happen and she finds unicorns and they stay, and she's just good at it. She helps train them. She's a great recruiter, and I'm an affiliate for her. So the first two things is the main thing I do. The main thing I do is the business planning and accountability coaching.
Okay.
Fractional COO is where I come in. Instead of doing like weekly coaching calls and business plan creation, I'm working hourly at either 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 hours a week on a contract for a time period as a COO. They're trying to either implement a strategy while simultaneously up leveling their office manager and turning them into more of an operations manager. So I leave them with the policy, systems, and procedures implemented, and I've leveled up their internal employee. So that's what I do in my fractional COO services. I have a buddy who's semi-retired, but he's always interested in, fractional CFO opportunities, and he's brilliant. I mean, he creates financial controls. He's a financial reports master. He reads that like a novel. He's brilliant. He shares the fee with me, so if you go down that list, HR, website design, all of those are people that I work, and some of them it's more than one, because there's multiple marketing companies I work with, and it really depends on their niche. Because to me, the best providers of services are the ones who niche down. When someone says, I will work with everybody, that's to me a red flag. It's like, if I'm going to have brain surgery, I don't want to go to my general practitioner and have him do the surgery. I want the specialist that just does brain surgery.
Right.
That's the same thing with lawyers. It's the same thing. But when it comes to marketing, it's the same thing. What's successful and helpful and useful for a law firm might be worthless for an insurance company. It might be just construction is different avatars, different things. But even when you get into the law firm world, there's things that work for personal injury lawyers that don't work for family lawyers, and vice versa. So understanding where people shine and knowing their strengths and pairing them up correctly, that's more useful to me, because the same thing is true. If I make a recommendation and the vendor does a bad job, it's my fault.
Sure.
So the same spirit behind the rule at my prior job still exists. I have to take it seriously. So I don't just recommend because some people pay a commission. And there's a couple on there that don't pay a commission, but it's just in my best interest for the people I'm working with to have a bookkeeper. It just makes sense.
Sure.
But that's why all the things are on there. So the first three things are me. I'm the company when it comes to those three things. After that, you're getting into my affiliates. Okay.
So on your business planning, what all entails with business planning?
Well, and that's a great question, because that's what a lot of businesses skip. And when you don't have a business plan, you have a business without a business plan. If you're financially successful, I think it's on accident, or you're leaving money on the table because you haven't built a strategy that touches all the different parts.
Okay.
But when I do a business plan, I even step back. I mean, the mindset of my book is I apply it. Why do you do what you do? Every day you put on a shirt and go do some work. Why do you do it? And then I challenge them on that, because what is everybody says the same thing. Everybody says, oh, my spouse and my kids. And I challenge them on that. I'm like, no, that's not your why. That's not your purpose. That's your responsibility and your obligation. Let's go deeper. Everybody I know with family members would likely kill or die for those people.
Sure.
Right. But it's not your why. Your why is, it could be, I had to pay my way through college and I want my daughter to have money for college. So I want that college fund is what's driving me. I want to give her something I didn't have, or be real honest. Like, I need an alarm clock to go, antiquing with my wife early in the morning. But if my deadbeat loser broke friends from college, who last time I talked to them screwed me over, want to go on this cool fishing trip and we got to leave at 2 a.m. Not only do I not need an alarm clock, I bought clothes. I have a checklist. I've mapped it out. I've the weather. I'm pacing, waiting for 2 a.m. so I can go. I'm motivated by this trip. And
Right.
it's not because I like these people more than my family, you know. But when people fight me there, I always say, okay, we're on a Zoom call. Open up your calendar and show me where's your daughter on your calendar. Because that's where your priorities are. And most of the time it's business related, but your priorities on your calendar. And we don't put our children or, you know, maybe their birthday or your anniversary is on the calendar, but it's not the same way we hold meetings and appointments. And, you know, even when we schedule time to be strategic or plan stuff, we don't include the family. Now, some people, they'll respond to this whole exercise by starting to put their family on their calendar. And that's awesome. You showed me, but look, bravo, that's good. Less than 1% of people do that. You know, that's a good thing. But once we have a real honest idea of the why, then we set goals. And I'm really specific about the goals. Like I really challenge them goal. If someone says, I want a Corvette, how much does that cost? Corvettes are cool. And if they say, I don't know, well, then that's not a goal. Go to the dealership, find out what it costs, find out what it would take as a down payment with your credit, plus the payment, plus the impact on your insurance. What's the net impact to your budget if you get a Corvette in 6 months? And when they come back with all those numbers, then we add it. Because if your business made $100,000 for you, but the company made $1 million, well, that's easy. That's 10%. We know that whatever the company makes, you're probably going to get 10%. It's a little more complicated than that, but I don't want to embarrass myself because I'm not good at math. I can divide anything by 10. So 10% is what you made. Well, if we figure out that we need an extra $1,000 a month net to have a Corvette by the end of the year, okay, well, that $100,000 was $8,300. We need to get it to $9,300. About a 10%. That means if that's the only goal that is applicable for this year, we need to do 1.1 million, not 1 million. And so I base the business plan on the goal that matches their personal goal. Okay. Because I consider that, when I was talking about proper motivation, goals motivate you. There are people that are motivated by a new boat or a car or a 4-week trip to Bora Bora with no cell phone. There are things that motivate us, and they're unique and they're personal. You know, they're different everywhere, you know. And it's amazing because I was working with people all over the country and outside of the country, and personal goals vary a lot. Most people that live on my street, if they had a bunch of extra money, they'd get a new, better side-by-side and a new shotgun. And Texas, you can relate. You know?
True.
Nobody in San Francisco has those goals. Nobody in Boston, Massachusetts hardly has those goals. But it doesn't matter. The goals are immaterial. It's just once we make the business plan about the goals, then we can go through this mathematical I made a spreadsheet, and it breaks everything down by quarter and by month and by week, and we break things down by marketing and where the leads are going to come from. How many leads does it take to get an appointment? All the numbers that they have to learn. And there's a lot of heavy lifting there because a lot of people don't know their numbers. But when we come out of that process, we have a business plan, and it's broken down into quarters, and each quarter is broken down by month. And I can hold them accountable then to that business plan. And if it takes us 10 hours to create your plan for the next year, we probably spent 8 hours on your why and your goals. Once we get the goals down, that's what's driving this business.
Sure.
And when you have a goal of a new kitchen and a 2-week trip to Greece, and you've been hyping it up with the wife and the kids, nobody wants to go home and say, hey, you know that 2-week trip to Greece? Well, we're just going to go to, how about a long weekend in Galveston?
Nothing wrong with that.
You don't want to have that conversation. You'll feel like a failure. So what do? You just don't have a bad quarter because you're motivated like a bear's chasing you. You know, if you said we're going to shell out, you know, 40 grand on a new kitchen that's overdue, do you want to go home and say, yeah, we're going to keep the plastic cabinets and the Formica countertops for one more year. I had a bad quarter. No, because if you unleash somebody on a kitchen renovation, there are countertop samples in the kitchen. There's paint swaths on the wall. There's backsplashes. People are excited and planning that. And you don't want to be the reason that that doesn't happen. So we set these goals, but we make sure that they're motivating and they have a deadline. Basically make them smart. But once we have the goals down and they're smart, the rest is just math. And then after that, we move into accountability. And some people can hold themselves accountable. It's usually better to have somebody from the outside doing that. If you ever worked out in a gym, you probably had way better results if you hired a trainer than if you just went and winged it. You know, the trainer makes you show up, makes you not skip leg day. The trainer makes you, you did more weight than you can do more weight than you can do one more set and one more, they're pushing you. And having someone who's not caught up in all the drama of the business be able to come in intimately aware of your goals and your business plan and, your budget, your finances, someone that's kind of a managing partner, but that's not an employee. That was my downfall at the job I had before. If I was doing my job as a proper COO, I would have told the owners, you got to get rid of that Paul guy. He's outlived his usefulness. He's flying a drone in your parking lot on the clock. He's writing a book and he's going to lunch for 3 hours. You don't need him anymore. But who's going to recommend to their boss that they get rid of themselves?
Yep.
But if I see an employee like myself on the team, like we either need to find a way to utilize that capacity that they bring,
Sure.
or maybe it's time to move on from that employee because that's not furthering the goal.
Correct.
And that sometimes it's hard to make personnel decisions when you're caught up in the drama. A lot of people who don't implement things like KPIs and ROIs and those type of management techniques, they have an incorrect view of who their best employee is and who their worst employee is. But the numbers don't lie. You can lie. We lie to ourselves every day, all day, but numbers just don't lie. So when you change the mindset to have everything be fact-based and you can distance yourself, you're starting that process of being a true entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter what business. To an entrepreneur, they don't care if it's a restaurant or a law firm or a brothel. It doesn't matter. They just want to pump money into something and with relatively little effort, take money out of it more than they pumped into it. That's what it's like, an investment.
So what has been kind of your biggest struggle with your business, or
Well, for me, it's been the transition. Because all my life I was in some form, even working for my dad. I would tell my teachers at school, you need to come eat at my dad's restaurant. I was always marketing because I was proud of it, always doing sales. Even at the law firm, I was marketing, I was networking, I was doing all those things. And the job I had, the first time since 1983 that I didn't have some sort of sales function. We had a waiting list. If anybody were to leave, they would just take someone off the waiting list. People would ask what I do and they could refer people to me. I was like, I'm good. And that was a weird existence for me. But I thought I finally outgrown sales. I finally matured past sales, only to realize as I'm working with law firms that I possess a skill set that they don't. And this is helpful to them. And this is valuable. And this is not something I should look at negatively. But I kind of got spoiled. And then when I went work for myself, I don't have just a full calendar of back-to-back coaching calls. I'm marketing. So I had to learn more about marketing. I had to try things that didn't work. I had to be proficient and consistent about sales, regardless of how many appointments I had. I had to make sure the clients I brought on actually paid. Somebody else always did that. I'm the entrepreneur. There's 10 parts of my business, and at least 5 times a week, I have to remind myself to take my own advice. And I'm growing it because I'm the entrepreneur. I'm the owner of the business. And if you own a business and you spend more than 20 hours doing the work, i.e., if you own a restaurant and you spend more than 20 hours a week cooking, something is slipping through the cracks, because there are 10 parts of every business, I guess. And the actual work is one of those 10 things. If you're spending 50% of your time in one of those 10 things, things are slipping through the cracks. And that's a big risk at a law firm, because if you could lose your license to practice law in all 50 states for having a sloppy bank account as a lawyer. And not intentional, just not having good bookkeeping. You can lose your license. And I talk to a lot of lawyers who do their own bookkeeping, and they do it when they get around to it because they're doing 40 hours of billable work a week. And they've also got to manage their team and hire and fire and market and sell. You have to do all these things. You can't get stuck in it. And I had to start hearing the gospel I had been preaching. And that's been an adjustment, because I mean, it's not a hard one, but it's frustrating because there's not that I haven't built that steady pipeline of too many customers to where I have people waiting for me to have space for them. I mean, I'm headed that direction, but you know, I have times when I could be earning money that I'm not, and I fill those gaps with more marketing, but I want to do less marketing because I have more work to do. But it's growth. Growth is expensive. If I get to 20 full-time clients, guess what? I got to hire somebody. It can't be a one-man show anymore. Well, who do I hire first? That's in the business plan. So the business plan connects all the dots. It talks about what your marketing plan is. It talks about what your sales process is. It creates the hiring plan. It talks about what the KPIs and the ROIs are. It talks about what financial controls are going to trigger what activities. What hires are you going to make in each quarter, assuming you hit your target revenue points? You know, if we double our revenue in a month, 3 months in a row, what's going to break? Which one of our employees is jumping out the window or quitting? Or, we've got to assume it's going to work. And if we assume it's going to work, we shouldn't be surprised that we're overworked, and our plan should tell us what to do.
Right.
So the planning is essential for the growth, but I think it's essential for everyone, because I read today that 80% of businesses fail in the first year or the first 5 years.
Yeah.
How many of those businesses would have succeeded had they started on day one with a plan or realistic expectations of what being an entrepreneur really is? Because too many people leave a job so that they could be a business owner and be their own boss, because their friend has a company and their friend doesn't work on Fridays and he leaves the office at 2 p.m. Well, how long has your friend been doing that? And what was, let's go back to his first year when this harebrained idea to start a business cost him his house and his wife, and he was doubting himself and depressed and had to sleep on the floor and eat ramen noodles and work 7 days a week every week for 6 months. You can't compare your chapter one to somebody's happily ever after. Because if you leave a paid gig where you're working 40 hours for a decent paycheck, understand that if you're going to go start a business, you're probably going to double the amount of hours you work. And there's no guarantee you're going to make a dime. But it is pretty certain that in the first year, you're probably not going to match your income. If you still want to start a business, then you have that entrepreneurial spark that I can work with. But if you're trying to go into business for yourself because you think it'll be easier and more flexible, you need some reality, or you're going to be part of that statistic that doesn't make it. But a plan will help you. I can take someone who has some misguided or fairy tale ideas of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I can talk to them, in real talk about what's really likely going to happen and how do we prepare for it. You can become an entrepreneur. But if you don't have that tendency, or you don't have that desire, I mean, it's not necessarily good to be an entrepreneur. If you're a pure entrepreneur, your life is a living, depressing, nightmarish hell. Working at a job, you are miserable. You can't innovate. You can't make decisions. You work for someone else, and you're trapped because the salary's too good. You got benefits. You got a pension. Sure. That's a miserable existence.
Yeah.
But it's also guaranteed failure if you don't have that, and you're trying to build a business. I talk to people who want to hire me, and after talking to them, I'm like, did you quit this job? Because I think I don't think you're going to have the success you're imagining. And that job sounds like a perfect fit for you. Or maybe find a similar job that pays more, but I think starting a business, I don't think you're being realistic about your plans. And that's not a wise move for me, because these are people that were intending to hire me to help them through that process. But I'm doing it because I personally get off on the growth. Like, it's my hobby. I have an inappropriate relationship with growth. I have made people millions of dollars, and those people were almost as excited about it as I was. I didn't make myself millions of dollars. I made them millions of dollars, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
It's great.
Well, Paul, we definitely appreciate you coming on. You've got definitely a unique business plan for sure, and business. And I think, a lot of people can definitely benefit from it, not just from your background, but also from what you do currently with helping businesses grow. And I'm sure that you're a very valuable asset to many.
You can tell I like to talk about it, probably.
Yeah.
No,
that's
a good thing, because you're passionate about it, which obviously it got to be, or else don't be in business for yourself. Yep. So
I agree.
Definitely appreciate it. And what we're going to do is, when we post this today, this podcast, we're going to put all the links and hyperlink everything down. So we got LaFamilia.net and Paul Angelle.
On the La Familia site, the way I market, or the way I fill my calendar, is I just have a Calendly link. Anybody can schedule a 1-hour free coaching call with me.
Okay.
It's kind of like a sales call, but I will show them how to make a business plan. And I'm not holding anything back. I will show them exactly what my process is. And if someone is very intelligent and they have a lot of time and they can hold themselves accountable, they can take that free call and, give their business a booster. Cool. But I know that a percentage of the people that I spend an hour talking about my business plan with, a percentage of them are going to say, I could benefit from this. And I know myself, I'm not going to follow through. I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to have time. That's my prospect. So whether it takes me I'm new, so I don't know my numbers yet. I don't know if I need to have 10 of those free calls to get a client, or 2 of those calls to get a client. But whatever that number is, until my calendar's full, I just want to have as many of those 1-hour free calls, because sometimes I have the call and it doesn't spark anything in the person I'm speaking to, but they have someone in mind that it's ideal for. And then I get an introduction that way.
Sure.
Is that the best?
Introductions from hosts on podcasts that say, man, you really need to talk to my brother-in-law. I'm tired of my sister complaining about his income. He's not going to give up, so he needs help. That's why it's so valuable to have more and more conversations. But on that La Familia website, if they go to the Get Started, it's a free, no obligation 1-hour coaching call.
Okay.
Is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think so. info@lafamilia.com. And then my personal email address is pauljamesangelle@gmail.com. But most people outside of Cajun country can't spell Angelle, so it doesn't help when I say it out loud. But everybody can spell info. But that's the best way to get me. I respond quickly. But once it's on that Calendly is connected to my calendar, and that calendar is connected to my iPhone, and I do whatever my iPhone tells me to do. So I never miss appointments if they're on my calendar.
Absolutely.
I take them very seriously. I worked at a job where I used to joke about having to modify my chair so that I wouldn't have to leave the room to take a bio break, because I was, these 60 and 90-minute calls back to back to back to back made it, impossible to eat lunch. I mean, when you're talking about being the CEO for 30 different businesses, there's only so many hours in the day. Now I could start early on the East Coast and stay late on the West Coast, but I told you I got large animals. If I don't stop at 6 p.m. for at least an hour, I might have property damage or a stampede or something. These animals are on a tight schedule and they hold me to it. But I've worked at night, I've worked weekends. So I don't have a problem. It's rare that I meet people that can match my energy, but match my energy. I'm not this energetic if it's time to, clean the bathroom. I don't get fired up, excited, and chatty. I just want to get it over with.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on, and wish you nothing but success for your business.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same was, and good luck on your podcast as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's inappropriate growth. That's
Okay.
I talk to business owners. I'm usually interested in the early days when they thought they had made a mistake.
Sure.
I'm not interested in the success. That's obvious to everyone. I want to know what it was like when you were losing your family and your house and eating
If
ramen
you wouldn't
noodles.
mind, send us the link to that so we can support you as well.
Sure. If you guys ever want to be a guest,
Absolutely.
same thing.
Welcome,
I'm always looking for guests.
All right, Paul. Well, you have a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. And for everybody else, we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
I promise I will. And you guys do the same.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after